What's up, everybody? It's your favorite coach's favorite coach, and we're starting a new series today where we're going to look at some of the all-time great teams and have them compete against each other to help determine once and for all who is the best team of all time. I don't know if anybody else has done anything like this, but I really wanted to look across generations and see how certain teams would match up with each other. Who would win? I'm sick and tired of the utter disrespect towards our legends. Our analysts in this newer generation have this fallacy that newer is always better. That's just not the case. Like I said in the Bird video, people say certain players couldn't compete in a different era. That's nonsense. To think that an all-time great would not be able to adjust and adapt to any given era blows my mind. Advanced analytics are legit, despite what Barkley and Shaq might say. However, analytics have only streamlined the process for understanding how to be effective as a player, and transcendent players can alter the state of what we consider the modern offense. For example, if Kareem Abdul-Jabbar or Shaquille O'Neal played in this era, they would still be scoring and they might cause new problems. In other words, if Shaq was in his prime now, today's system would have to adapt, creating a new variable for advanced analytics to consider. Also, if some of these greats had access to these analytics, they would have adjusted their game accordingly. So in the first round, we're going to look at the 2013 Miami Heat, led by LeBron James, versus the 1996 Chicago Bulls, led by Michael Jordan. Some ground rules before we start. All teams will play by the modern era rules, the current rules. They'll have access to some of the newer developments in the recent system, and this is only because they would obviously easily adapt to them. All players on their roster will also be playing at full capacity for that given season. So we're not going to take the best version of Scottie Pippen of all time. We're going to take the 96 version of Scottie Pippen. However, he's going to be 100% healthy without any back or ankle problems. I don't want anybody complaining about injuries or anything like that. Again, every player will be playing at full capacity for that given season. We're going to be doing a head-to-head comparison between rosters, stats, offensive and defensive schemes, as well as analyzing the competition they both faced to make it to the finals. This will take era into consideration because era only matters once you make it to the playoffs. So jumping right in, part 1 is roster to roster comparison. This isn't 2K. I hate when people look at a roster player to player and derive a conclusion on who's the better team based on which roster wins more head-to-head matchups. That's not how basketball works. We're going to analyze how each player fits in and how they match up, given offensive and defensive schematics. The 1996 Chicago Bulls are going to start Ron Harper, Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, Dennis Rodman, and Luke Longley. The 2013 Miami Heat are going to start Mario Chalmers, Dwayne Wade, LeBron James, Chris Bosh, and Udonis Haslem. Their bench is a little deeper, and we're going to go into Ray Allen, Mike Miller, Shane Battier, Chris Birdman Anderson, Rashard Lewis, and Norris Cole. Just off the bat, as far as the way the rosters work, the depth definitely goes to Miami. This is absolutely my favorite bench of all time. Shane Battier and Mike Miller were absolutely critical for them in 2013, and they were consummate role players. Ray Allen, even though he came off the bench technically, was one of the top 3 players on the team. They wouldn't have been able to do it without him. Chris Birdman Anderson was another great fit with his post defense and ability to catch lobs, and obviously Norris Cole and Rashard Lewis got some quality minutes for them, so the Heat were able to utilize their bench effectively. The 2013 Miami Heat aren't exactly the modern era by any stretch of the imagination, but I still don't think Bill Wennington would be much of a factor in this series. He would just be there to relieve Luke Longley. In the late 90s, a lot of people had token, thick 7-footers. They were there essentially to spell relief for anyone who was guarding Shaquille O'Neal, pick up a few fouls, and send him to the free throw line. So I don't think Wennington's going to be too big of a factor in this series. The key bench players for the Chicago Bulls in this series are Steve Kerr and Tony Kukoc. Tony Kukoc is one of the quintessential sixth men of all time. He's a great playmaker, and he's very clutch. Steve Kerr is also a notoriously clutch shooter and can fit in any era. Also, both of these guys have very high basketball IQs, and that can't be overstated. But I would say the overall depth is in favor of the Miami Heat in this matchup. As far as pure player talent, I think this will still go to the Miami Heat. This is one of the original super teams, 4 or 5 Hall of Famers included on this roster. LeBron James, one of the top 4 or 5 best players of all time. Dwayne Wade has to be in the top 50. And of course, Ray Allen and Chris Bosh, perennial all-stars, possibly Hall of Famers. But make no mistake, Ray Allen was the big difference between 2012 and 2013. And he was the primary reason why I chose this rendition of the Miami Heat. However, despite all that, this isn't as one-sided as you might think, because at the end of the day, Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, Dennis Rodman are on the other side of the court. So based on pure talent in a 2K system, the slight edge would go to the Miami Heat. How much will this impact on the overall result? We'll find out. This brings us to section 2, team offense. Obviously, the Chicago Bulls are going to run their triangle offense under Phil Jackson. This offense gets completely underrated nowadays, typically because of the media, guys like Stephen A. Smith, Max Kellerman, a lot of guys who are big New York fans for whatever reason, very biased towards New York. They spend a lot of time ripping on the triangle offense, saying that it doesn't work and it's antiquated. That's just not true, especially given the personnel who'd be running the triangle. Guys like Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, Ron Harper. You don't need a traditional point guard for that triangle offense. You just need somebody who's going to go to the corner and spread the offense and be able to make plays out of the strong side corner. This allows them to maximize Michael Jordan's offensive gifts while retaining good movement off of the ball for the other 4 players. It's the perfect offense for them. For the Miami Heat, the brain trust of Eric Spoelstra and Pat Riley led to the most successful LeBron James system team of all time. They were actually able to have LeBron James play in a semi-structured system and be able to utilize all their pieces effectively. This is largely due to the influence Pat Riley had over the team. Primarily, they depend on creating a lot of turnovers, and were a juggernaut in transition offense with Dwayne Wade and LeBron James. Those two in transition, maybe one of the best transition teams of all time, either them or the Showtime Lakers. That was their meat and potatoes. When things got slowed down to the half court, they liked to utilize horn sets and have Chris Bosh pick and pop. He'd be open a lot of the time and was a great spot-up shooter because of the attention LeBron, Wade, and Allen would receive. They liked to run pistol and hammer plays to get Ray Allen open on the perimeter, but by far, he was mostly able to get open by having LeBron James and Dwayne Wade penetrate, draw a ton of attention, and then kick it out to him. The same goes for Battier and Mike Miller, who hit a ton of critical shots down the stretch in their championship run against the San Antonio Spurs. Again, these guys were getting touches, but they could stay warm even if they weren't, and that's definitely a testament to the professionalism of Battier, Allen, and Miller. But essentially, this is Eric Spoelstra and Pat Riley going up against Phil Jackson. This is a pretty close matchup as far as overall offensive scheme. Both of these schemes are very much a product of their era, particularly with the Miami Heat, who did ISO Wade and LeBron a lot. But this section's important because this is where coaches have the most impact. For those of you who might be wondering why there's no coaches matchup in this video, it's simply because their impact is going to be within the offensive and defensive schematics. Anyways, it's also important to note that both teams have players that aren't offensive threats, but are playing major roles, this being Udonis Haslem and Dennis Rodman. The triangle offense involves everyone, but it's initiated through Michael Jordan. It's very similar to modern day read and react. They can move the ball inside and out freely, and the attention drawn from Pippen and Jordan driving will leave shooters like Kerr open on the three-point line. Schematically, this is essentially a wash, so it'll come down to the intangibles that are going to be the deciding factors here. Now on to defense. The defensive assignments are going to be Ron Harper guarding Chalmers and Ray Allen, Luke Longley guarding Haslem, Dennis Rodman guarding Chris Bosh, Scottie Pippen guarding LeBron, and Michael Jordan guarding Dwayne Wade. I'd imagine at some point this would have to switch because Michael Jordan would insist on guarding LeBron James. But this is most likely how the series would start. For the Bulls, it's clamps everywhere. Harper's a great defender, Rodman's a great defender, Pippen's a great defender, and Jordan's a great defender. This is absolutely one of the best defensive teams of all time and can guard inside and out very effectively. As for the Heat, Chalmers and Allen would guard Harper, Haslem would guard Longley, Bosh would guard Rodman, Dwayne Wade would guard Michael Jordan, and LeBron James would guard Scottie Pippen. So during this time, LeBron James was still one of the premier defensive players in the league, so he might accept the role of guarding Michael Jordan, but he definitely has the alibi of guarding Scottie Pippen and having Dwayne Wade guard Jordan. However, keep in mind that this 2013 Miami Heat team was not an all-time defensive team. Their defensive rating dropped significantly from 4th overall in the previous year to 9th. The Heat's most effective defensive scheme was when they played a smaller, more athletic lineup. They wouldn't use a traditional lane clogger. This allowed them to overwhelm teams with their athleticism. Spoelstra called it their skirmish, and it's essentially an aggressive man-to-man defense. The lineup that would cause the Bulls major problems is with Allen, Chalmers, Wade, LeBron, and Chris Bosh. They would probably use Pippen at the 4 and Rodman at the 5, and bring Steve Kerr or Tony Kukoc to guard Mario Chalmers. Chalmers becomes a wild card in this scenario, as Tony Kukoc would have a very difficult time guarding him. Also, they would not be able to use Luke Longley at the middle of their triangle offense, a big man who's a good passer with a high basketball IQ. Anyways, the big factor defensively is the Jordan-LeBron matchup. Should Jordan guard LeBron James, Pippen is still versatile enough to guard Wade, Allen, or Bosh for that matter. So I think in this matchup, the defense goes to the Bulls. Now let's look at the competition both teams had to face in order to reach the finals that year. In 2013, the Miami Heat had to beat the San Antonio Spurs. This Spurs team's offense was insane, and they're one of the few non-champion teams
I'd rank in my top 50 of all time.
Their ball movement was amazing, and they were able to utilize 11 guys. However, the Bulls had to go through the gauntlet during that era.
A lot of people might say the late 90s era couldn't compete with today's teams, but this is just simple ignorance.
Right away in the first round, they had to get through the Miami Heat led by Alonzo Mourning.
In the second round, they were faced off with conference rivals, the New York Knicks, led by Anthony Mason, Charles Oakley, John Starks, and of course, Patrick Ewing. Patrick Ewing would have caused a ton of problems in today's modern defense and was a massive 7-foot center who could play both sides of the floor. Overall, the Knicks were a very physical, gritty team that could have won championships in many eras. In the Eastern Conference Finals, they faced the Orlando Magic. This would be a modern-day super team. They featured legit three-point shooting with Nick Anderson and Dennis Scott, along with a 6'7" transcendent point guard in Penny Hardaway, and one of the best centers of all time in Shaquille O'Neal. My thoughts on the three teams the Bulls had to face on their way to the Eastern Conference Finals? Yes, analytics have changed the way we think of the game. However, had any of these three players, Alonzo Mourning, Patrick Ewing, and Shaquille O'Neal, faced today's modern players, what good is scoring 40% from behind the arc when you have players who can score from point blank at 90%? Because with all these 7-foot three-point shooters out there, there's not going to be anyone there strong enough to stop them. Remember, dunks are very valuable in analytics. They would, in effect, add a new variable to consider. Last but not least, the Chicago Bulls faced the Seattle Supersonics in the finals. The Sonics were led by none other than the Glove, Gary Payton, and Shawn Kemp. This is a well-rounded, kind of prototypical modern-style team. They had shooters in Hersey Hawkins, they had Detlef Schrempf, they had Eric Snow on their bench, and they had lockdown defense. Shawn Kemp would be something similar to modern-day Blake Griffin. So who had the hardest route to their respective championship? I'm going to have to go with the Chicago Bulls. Michael Jordan was a dream killer. A lot of these teams would have won championships had he not been in their way. These Knicks teams were legendary during this era. Shaq Penny and the Orlando Magic were freakish, and the 96 Sonics were 64-18. So because I got the idea for this series from watching videos like this, I'm going to steal their format and break down how I see the series inevitably going. Before I start, this isn't going to be some fantasy imagination game where I'm going to break down play by play. Michael Jordan takes off from the free throw line. LeBron James is playing help defense in the corner. It's not going to be like that. I'm going to look at tangible outcomes and tendencies that would inevitably occur at some juncture in the series. First of all, home court advantage is going to go to the team with the better record. So that means the Chicago Bulls, who are 72-10, will control home court advantage. We're going to do a modern NBA Finals format. 2-2-1-1-1. As is the case in most game ones, both teams will be trying to stick to the script. And usually, as these series progress, adjustments are made, game plans diminish, and the bench shortens. So in game one, the Heat are going to try and take advantage of their talent and depth by involving everybody early in their offense. In the half court, as mentioned earlier, they're going to run horns and use Chris Bosh as a screener. The spacing this provides allows him to pick and pop, and if he's knocking down shots in game one, that's going to be good for the Heat long term. Ray Allen is also going to be a major piece for them. He's going to get involved in the offense easily just by being on the perimeter if LeBron James and Dwayne Wade get stopped penetrating. In transition, he's also going to be a major option in their early offense series, especially with pistol action. He's also going to be a walking secondary break after teams weather the storm of LeBron James and Dwayne Wade in the open court. The Bulls, as always, are going to be running their triangle offense, and they're going to make a point to involve people like Ron Harper, Tony Kukoc, and Steve Kerr early. Not only did Phil Jackson use the triangle offense to maximize Michael Jordan, it was also designed to make sure the rest of the team was moving off of the ball and not just watching him play. This is how they're able to effectively use the rest of the talent on the team. And also, legitimately involve a true second option in Scottie Pippen. So overall in Game 1, the offense variable is going to be very close. I think I'm going to give the slight edge to the Miami Heat. This is based off the strength of their legendary primary and secondary break. I think defense is going to be one of the key differences in this first game, as Rodman's going to be able to stifle Chris Bosh, Jordan's going to shut down Dwayne Wade, and Pippen's probably as good of a matchup as you're going to get on LeBron James in history. LeBron's still going to get his, Ray Allen's still going to be a problem, but I think overall, due primarily to defense, the Bulls would win a close Game 1 at home. In Game 2, there's a lot of key variables to consider that can change the outcome of the entire game. The first one is, at what point would Jordan demand to guard LeBron James? Also, what mismatches would this create? Another one would be, is Miami's bench going to get hot? Can the Heat turn the Bulls over enough to work their break? And when will LeBron decide he's going to have to go head-to-head with the juggernaut that is Michael Jordan? All of these variables could tilt the game one way or the other. But it's important to note, the team that needs these variables the most are the Miami Heat. This is simply due to the makeup of the team's DNA. The Bulls are just a little more steady, depending on consistent variables like defense, cohesive teamwork, and when things break down, they rely on number 23. Miami's a little more precarious and volatile. However, with volatility comes explosion, so they can get very hot. And when they do, they may have more firepower and athleticism than any team ever assembled, but more has to go right for them to win. So, for this reason, 9 times out of 10, I believe Game 2 is going to go to the Chicago Bulls, especially if the game is in Chicago. With Game 3 going back to Miami, I'd imagine the Miami Heat would play to their crowd, use home court to their advantage, and LeBron James would have to take a huge stand to prove that he's the best player of all time. I'd imagine they would win Game 3 in Miami simply because of that. LeBron can do incredible things when his legacy is on the line. They might be able to turn over the Bulls a little bit more, and this will ignite their dynamic fast break. They should win, and they should win big. Game 4 in Miami is when things are going to start really getting interesting. This is what I mean when I say the difference between the Heat's tenuous variables and the Bulls' reliable ones. You can guarantee that after a loss, Jordan is going to retaliate and go at LeBron James and the Miami Heat with one intention: to finish them. And for the Heat, they have to be mentally ready to deal with this and at least weather it right after a win. It would require a lot of energy, and a lot of things have to go their way in order to beat the Bulls under these conditions. As a result, most likely, things are going to start breaking down. Things generally start to break down in 7-game series around Game 4. When this happens, advantage Bulls all day long. And this is simply because the triangle allows you to play in chaos. When the rhythm of the games now become best player versus best player, the triangle allows you to function better. And that's because the peripheral players are going to move off ball due to habit, not sequence and timing. So this would be a lot of Jordan and Pippen versus Wade and LeBron. Who's going to get the most out of their possessions? To an extent, the Bulls are still going to be able to run their offense, but the Heat will most likely have to resort to ISOs and hero ball. I think they can still turn over the Bulls, but it's not going to be enough to have an impact. Ray Allen will still be a major factor. However, you have to consider the clutch players on the other end, Tony Kukoc and Steve Kerr. Their efforts are going to be enough to at least neutralize this. But the Jordan onslaught will be real. There's nothing more dangerous than a vengeful Michael Jordan. I think the Bulls win big in Game 4. Game 5 back in Chicago. Like most Game 5s, when the talent is even, the game will be decided by intangibles like grit, clutch, ability to overcome adversity, and poise. LeBron is clutch. Wade is clutch. Ray Allen is clutch. Mike Miller and Shane Battier are both clutch. And for the Bulls, Tony Kukoc is clutch, Steve Kerr is clutch, but Michael Jordan is the most clutch player of all time. We're going to attempt to define what it means to be clutch. It simply comes down to being professional. How much do you understand your role, and how prepared are you to seize the opportunities when they present themselves? Will you have the presence of mind to shoot when you haven't gotten your touches? Will you accept any outcome beforehand and just allow yourself to trust your instincts? These are big questions to ask. Another important variable for both teams in the series: at some point, Chris Bosh is going to go off in one of these games. This is going to be very difficult to determine because Dennis Rodman's going to be hounding him all series long. He'd be very frustrated. There's absolutely no doubt about that. At this point, desperation starts to set in for the Miami Heat. especially for LeBron James and Dwayne Wade. They would start to abandon their game plan and lose discipline and rely on what they've always been able to fall back on, their superior talent. Make no mistake, these two are all-time competitors, and to this point, very few teams have been able to stop them. They are the apex players, and so clutch is going to be a wash. Also, extraneous variables in this particular game are going to be a wash. Throughout the series, the Miami Heat have needed a lot of variables to go their way in order to win. And in this Game 5, they're going to seize all of them. Because no doubt, at some point in that series, Chris Bosh was going to go off, Ray Allen was going to catch fire, Shane Battier is going to put Pippen in foul trouble by taking charges. The volumes of variables are going to work in their favor throughout the course of the series. And they're all going to have to be there tonight, facing elimination. The other big intangible that we've been ignoring up to this point might be the most important one to this particular matchup, and that's the ability to overcome adversity. The reason it's been looked over is because all legendary teams have this in their makeup. LeBron has overcome adversity. Dwayne Wade has overcome adversity. Essentially, the entire Miami Heat roster has overcome a tremendous amount of adversity and have come out the other side as a better team as a result, especially after that finals loss to Dallas. However, despite all that, adversity is the one single factor that ignites Michael Jordan into a human killing machine. He absorbs it, feeds off of it, and it seems to give him preternatural powers. He would be a god in there. But there's no doubt this game is going to be decided by one factor: Michael Jordan versus LeBron James. The Bulls would win this series in 5, despite most factors being even on paper. Everything in this series comes down to one thing, and that's who's the greatest player of all time, and who's willing to pull out all the stops to not only prove that, but to conquer it. Who's going to do more to seize that crown? With all things relatively equal, there's no stopping Michael Jordan in this situation. All teams throughout the course of history who run into Michael Jordan and could potentially run into Michael Jordan would fall to Michael Jordan.
As always, thank you guys for watching. I know a lot of you guys aren't going to agree with everything in this video, so let me know in the comment section. Also, let me know what matchups you might want to see in the future. If you liked, please subscribe and share, and we'll see you on round 2 of this series.